All right, week 5 is going to be continuing on with experimental designs. And what we've done now, this chapter calls them complex. Early on, we had some nice simple designs. Now we're going to get a little more complex, or a lot more complex. Let's see, internet. Okay, I got that. All right. So the main terms to run through that, I'm going to diagram a few designs out here for us. But you're going to see terms like internal, external validity. So the idea behind, I need to add one more here before I get too far. Okay. The idea for design is we're trying to demonstrate, to show our science of behavior, that we're trying to show that what we did actually was contributing to, we won't always claim cause effect, but that what we did, our manipulated variables, our treatments, had some correlated effect on the behavior, either made more behavior, some kind of reinforcing, or it made less behavior. So we're trying to state that this changes when and only when I do this treatment. I'm trying to reduce behavior, and I'm going to get some baseline at some amount of behavior. And if that's too much behavior and it's a problem, I'm going to try to find some systematic procedure where I can use my behavioral environmental variables and try to decrease it. And then I want to be able to show and explain that it changed because of what I did, not just on its own. And I don't know if I mentioned back in 01 about the idea of the Null Hypothesis that basically says things are going to do what they're going to do anyway. It doesn't matter what you do. You don't really make a difference. And so what we do is we're going to create an alternative hypothesis and say what I'm doing will make a difference. So basically everything is compared to the idea that it was going to do what it's going to do anyway. And we need to demonstrate with some experimental design that it changes when and only when I do what I do. And we're trying to show experimental control. Now, the thing behind all those, we're actually trying to solve problems. So in the ABA world, we're doing problem solving. We're not just changing it because we can. With experimental analysis of behavior or the research with non-humans in laboratories, we can control a lot of variables and just see how could we change behavior to get the principles. Now, when we're trying to solve those with ABA, we're trying to find a socially significant behavior to make better for the client, better for the family, better for the teacher, better for society. So it has social significance. And the experimental design is how we would demonstrate and share in publications with other people what we've learned about changing the environment and how our design tries to make the argument it changed because of what we did. In the field, the work we're doing, we rarely go beyond getting a baseline, reducing the behavior to some acceptable level. If we can get it down here, it's okay down here, we're done. Or the same thing, if there's missing behavior, I'm going to try to get it up to some acceptable level. And we're not going to be asked to demonstrate or reverse it or try to prove, which is if it's better now and the parents see it's better and the teachers see it's better, then that's pretty much where it's going to stop. Most funding streams are not going to pay you to move it up and down just to show that what you did. They're going to say if it's better, we're done. But to be the behavioral scientist that you are becoming, we're going to have to at least know what the arguments are and recognize how the designs. So if we read articles, you'll see here's what they did. And then we're trying to get to that science behind it. Why would it do that? Why would it change there? What makes it go up? Why is it moving the way it's moving by charting the data? So what we're going to talk about is to have some credibility with our designs. We're going to talk about the validity as in terms of internal validity or external validity. So I'm talking about if I've got a client and I've got a low level of behavior and I do something and I get higher behavior, and I simply have the A-B design baseline in treatment, I can't claim a functional relationship because it might have gone up on its own. So in my B condition, I saw an increase, I can go back to the A condition and stop doing what I did, withdraw my treatment, and I can show that it went back down. And I'm showing it changed because of what I did. And then I can show that it was, when I put it back in, I reinstate the treatment. I now can show some experimental control that it changes when and only when I do what I do. And then I'm going to make the argument, my alternative hypothesis was, this has reinforcing properties, whether it's stickers or stars or praise. What I did here made more behavior, I can turn it on, I can turn it off. So when this works within the design, I have internal validity for this single subject. This is one person. And this person, they're their own control as far as the baseline. The area of statistical measurement, statistical significance is going to be based on much larger numbers. And that's kind of the gold standard is random clinical trials and random assignment. behavior analysis does single subjects, so we're using a different model that is not it's just a different model. We're going to look at the individual's behavior. So, internal validity is when it works within that subject. External validity is, can I use this for someone else? If I did this treatment for Billy, can I work this treatment on Bobby? Will it work outside of this treatment? So I'm going to look for external validity. Okay, now, the designs we're going to talk through here, these are the ones in this chapter, is going to be changing criteria, multiple probe, talk about sequence effects, multiple treatment, alternating treatments, parametric analysis, and directly replicating, trying to do the same result again, and then significance, the kinds of significance. I mentioned statistical significance. In ABA, we don't collect the kind of data to do statistical analysis, because if you can show a probability that it was going to change at a probability 0.05 or even 0.01 or 0.000, oh my God, that's statistically significant. It doesn't mean that it's really changed the client's life. It's just a very good demonstration of the probabilities of numbers. That's more taking mathematical formulas to take the variance out by math versus taking the variance out in the actual environment. If we're doing research and I've got a baseline and the behavior is variable, I don't start my treatment, because that means there's too many other things in the environment that are affecting this. And I can't make the argument that when I put my treatment in, that I all of a sudden made it better. So what we do is we take the variability out during baseline, and we keep removing variables until we get a fairly stable baseline. Otherwise, we just can't say, we can't make much of an argument. It changed because of me. It was bouncing around already. So rather than statistically using mathematical formulas and summing the squares, etc., to take out the variability with formulas, we're going to do it with the direct environment. So just to walk through these designs, as I said, the simple design was a baseline and a treatment. Put it in, take it out. With a changing criteria design, what we're doing is we're going to change some dimension of the behavior. We talked before about the three main parts of behavior. It has repeatability, has temporal extent, temporal locus, and we can measure those with frequency and rate and duration. We can talk about the delay, latency, and we can talk about we bring in the other definitions for the topography and the magnitude. So any of those things we measure with designs, we can try to change them in changing criteria. So we're going to start with behavior. I'll take this one, something we're going to try to increase. So what we're looking at, let me quickly give Ronald a point for checking in here. For changing criteria, I'm going to make gradual changes. I'm going to try to demonstrate experimental control. So this will be my number of responses. We'll put this at 0, 2, 4, 8. Here's so I can start with a nice short baseline, and I'm not getting too much behavior. So I'm going to set a criteria that in order to get reinforced, I need at least 4 responses. So I set the contingency to do this because it's maybe doing math problems. I need you to do 4 more math. The child doesn't do many math problems. I need you to do this a couple here and there. I set my at 4. So I'm going to set my criteria that I want to get at least 4 math problems to get this ticket, to get your reward. And then the student starts responding 3 and 5, 4, and I get a little higher performance by raising the criteria for performance. Welcome, Ronald. Let me have you go ahead and mute your microphone, take out any background noises.
My apologies.
Well, I'm here. Okay, thank you. So now what I've done is I have my first phase. This would be like, I'll call it baseline. I don't always have to have a baseline, but I have to get some starting place. So this would be like phase B1. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the next phase, B2. I'm going to change the criteria in order to be reinforced for doing math. I'm now going to raise the criteria to 6. So I'm targeting 6. And anytime I get 6, I'm going to start to reinforce it. So I get 5, then I get 6, I get 7, I get 6, I get 5. So I'm now getting and demonstrating that from the baseline, it changed when I changed criteria. Then I changed criteria again, and now this became the old baseline. This is what it was. I've changed my procedure by changing the requirement for reinforcement, and I'm now getting, I'm not getting exactly that, but I'm getting a little higher rate of responding. So, and this might be if I'm trying to gradually get a student to do more problems. So I'm going to raise the criteria again. Go to the next phase, I'll phase B3. I'll set criteria at 8, and then I'll reinforce when the behavior hits 8. So I might get 7 and 8 and 8 and 9, 8. So I now see that I'm gradually raising the criteria, and I'm getting more behavior. I'm getting actually more behavior for the same amount of reinforcement. And now it looks like an increasing trend, even though it changes when and only when I do it. So one of the things I need you to do to show experimental control is, instead of just argue, well, he just started getting more successful with math because he's doing more math, so he's doing more math because there's more reinforcement. And ideally, when you get the math problem correct and you're right because you know you're right, that's nice for intrinsic reinforcement. That's what we want. We often have to start with some extrinsic reinforcement and then complement and teach, or you did a good job, keep working. So to argue that that my treatment was contributing to this success, for this phase, I can lower the criteria, put it back down here. And now I see I'm getting responses around here. So it's like the matching law. You're going to do the amount of behavior to get the payoff. So here's what I required for payoff was more and more behavior, working more number of math problems. And I lowered the criteria, and when the performance meets criteria, I can show that it wasn't just getting better, always going to do more and more and more. I changed criteria. Then I could put it back up here and get the desired amount of math problems I need done. So in this case, I'm measuring the number of problems solved, a count, a simple count of just a frequency. How many did he do? I could do this, if this is a child, I could take another dimension of behavior. If I want to get a child to read, then I've got them reading for, say, 2 minutes. I'm doing a duration measure. And then I set the criteria to read for 4 minutes in order to get this. If I'm giving them stickers, now you got to read for 4 minutes to get stickers. Now you're going to read for 6 minutes to get stickers. So the idea of changing criteria is I take what dimension of behavior do I need? Do I need to read longer? Do I need to work more problems? Do I need whatever I'm measuring? I can set the criteria. So I'm taking the behaviors in the repertoire, and what I'm shaping is one of those measurable dimensions. If I've got a child who's reading at a table, and he's reading very softly, and the teacher can't quite hear him, so we're trying to get a little more magnitude. Read loud enough to be heard from 2 feet away, loud enough to be heard from 4 feet away, loud enough to be heard across the table. So there the teacher sets the criteria for a child that talks very softly and says, when I can hear you, you get your stickers. And the teacher scoots the chair back a little and tells the child to speak louder, and then he speaks loud enough to be heard further away, so I can increase the magnitude, the intensity, how loud the child is reading or speaking. So changing criteria is where I'm going to be basically shaping one of the measurable dimensions. I do have the behavior in the repertoire, but I'm still shaping some aspect of it. And this is how I would experimentally show that I have instructional control, that it changes. Experimental control, it changes when and only when I do my treatment. And that's what's meant by changing criteria. And you could flip that over if you had a problem. If you're trying to solve somebody's had a problem, they wanted to cut back on smoking, I can do the same thing. I'm just going to start and go the other direction. Somebody says, I'm already smoking 10 cigarettes a day in my baseline. I'm trying to cut back on smoking, so I've set up some reward system when you cut it back to 8 a day, and then I get a baseline here. And one thing I need to mention is, just to help show the experimental control, if I always have exactly 4 data points, it could be some pattern forming. So I could pick one where I just need 3 data points to show that it changed. And then I could have one where I'm actually getting maybe 5 data points. So I can vary the number of criteria that I need, the number of responses I need to set that. And I can, by changing the length of time or the number of criteria, I can show that this behavior is matching my reinforcement contingency. That it's not just, I just gradually cut down 2 cigarettes a day every day for a week. So this is again to demonstrate experimental control. So I can, whether I want to make some aspect of behavior go up or go down, in this case, smoking fewer cigarettes until I get down to whatever the target is. That's where you change the criteria for the same amount of reinforcement. Now I'm going to jump for a moment down here to parametric analysis because it looks a lot the same. And I want to make the distinction with the parametric analysis. What I'm doing is I'm getting many measures, parametrics, metrics measures, many measures of the value of the independent variable. How much of the treatment do I need to get the behavior? So in this case, if I want the student to give me at least 2, so I'm going to say, I'm going to put this up here with, I'll say, I'm going to keep it simple. I'm given 2 stickers, and I get a certain amount of behavior for 2 stickers. My independent variable before was a sticker, do a math problem, get a sticker, do a math problem, get a sticker. I had to get 4. Now I can say, what if I give 4 stickers? So the contingency, the behavior still needs to occur, but what I'm doing is I'm changing the amount of the reinforcer. If you compare it to, if you go to the doctor and you go in because you've got some, you need some medicine, the doctor's going to give you, say, 20 milligrams of some type of medicine. And he's going to see, is that enough to knock down the infection? And if you come back a week later and it's not better, he might jump it to 30. So sometimes, so part of it is how much medicine do I need to take care of this infection? Or how much reinforcement do I need to get the most behavior? So flipping from raising the criteria to get the same amount of reinforcement, I want to see what can I get, how much my bang for the buck? What if I give 6 stickers? Can I get more behavior? What if I give 8 stickers? At some point, I'm pretty much maxed out what that person's going to be able to do. So it turns out if I give, maybe I give 10 stickers, but really they're pretty much topping out here about 8. So there's where I sort of push the threshold. I'm just not going to get more. I figure I can get the student to do this person do about 8 of them, but that's the more rewards not going to do, more reinforcement is not going to make much more behavior. So again, for the experimental design point is to show I can change it by what I'm doing. And then you've got to figure what problem am I solving and what's reasonable for the client, what are the target behaviors, what level of behavior do I need to be significant to solve the problem, to be socially significant, and to be clinically significant, have I solved the problem? So the parametric analysis and the changing criteria design will look very much alike. The difference is I changed the criteria for the same reinforcement. I kept raising the stakes, give me more behavior for the same stickers. Or when I do parametric, I'm seeing how can I change the actual level of reinforcement? And I kept getting more reinforcement to see if I could get more behavior. You're answering slightly different experimental questions. Okay. With the next design, a multiple probe, just like if you remember the multiple baseline, I had more than one baseline. With the multiple baseline, I would collect data of the first subject, and when I had stable data, I would introduce treatment, but I would let the second baseline continue to run while this behavior started to change. Then I would start the treatment staggered later, and if this is the same subject, I can show the internal validity this is working. If I have different subjects, I'm showing this same treatment that worked for this child works on a different child, so I can get the external validity here. And again, I let some amount of time, I can stagger the time so it's not all the same. And that's just my simple A-B multiple baseline. I can have 3 different students, 3 or more, what's 2 or more because it's multiple, but typically you'll see 3. It's not uncommon for schools to run this with kids in special rooms and getting up to 9 baselines. They're tracking lots of behaviors. The multiple baseline lets me show that it changes when and only when I do the treatment. But the advantage of that is I don't have to withdraw treatment. The disadvantage is that's a lot of data collection. So one of the strategies is to just probe and test to see where the behavior is. And with that then, what I can do is just probe the behavior, not collect all that data, and start my treatment. And then just before I start this second treatment, I probe it again. I'm going to make that assumption for the null hypothesis that if the behavior was at this level and I haven't done anything different and I probe it and it's still there, it's not likely that it jumped up here for some reason and then came back down the same day I probed. I'm going to make some assumption that the baseline would have been stable. And the main point of the multiple probe is to save a lot of time collecting data if I can get the same basic effect with fewer data points. Multiple probe is just, I'm going to just test it here and there. See, Anna just joined us. There we go. All right. So that's the multiple probe is going to be saving lots of data and just make points. Question, Bill?
In multiple probe, it's going to be less individualized, that you're basically committing a program to multiple students doing it that way. And what if you have a student that responds, but another student's got an auditory processing problem and isn't responding to the verbal instructions, for example? And anyway.
Excellent point. So then I would see if I'm failing to get generalization, I'm failing to get the second one, I've got to be looking at those variables. And one of the things when we're assessing, this goes under section G of the CCRs, when we're initially assessing for the behavior, one of the things that I think it's the second item, GO2, is to look at medical biological variables. So if we've done our due diligence and we put this in with 3 different students, and we're supposed to already know this student has an auditory processing or just doesn't hear well. And if it's not working, that's going to alert me to be, have I looked at other variables that might affect that student's performance? I mean, we know all the way from a child that doesn't eat breakfast is not going to get the best performance on the days he eats and he doesn't. And if we've got some biological medical issues, such as auditory processing or any sensitivities to sound or movement, then this treatment may not generalize, may not work for that child. So we do lose something with this. We were making some assumption they're all available to do it, but we need to already have done that with our due diligence and our initial assessments to see. And that's a flag. If we're seeing something's not working, that can be a flag to go back and assess to see what's missing. Why is this not working? That's an excellent point, because we just want to think it's going to work. And the whole point of the single subject rule is that it's different for everybody. Even though the principles work, if you've got other issues that are not reinforcement, punishment, operant respondent based, they're simply biological genetic variables, there's no way you're going to reinforce that. You're going to change it by reinforcement. That's multiple probe. One of the issues with advanced complex designs is the sequence of your treatment. So I want to talk a little bit about sequent effects and multiple treatment. With a typical design, I would have my baseline, some level, I would put in the treatment, I might get some improvement, and then I might add another treatment. So now I'm going to a multi-element because I've got more than one treatment. So if this is stickers, and maybe this is going to be high fives, a different reinforcer. And I'm starting to get a little more behavior here. I see it gradually going up. I'm going to ask the question, is the sequence making a difference? What if I had done C before B? So sometimes we're built for teaching reading, we know we've got to teach first the symbol recognition of a letter or a number. Then we've got to teach the name of that letter. We've got to teach the sound the letter makes. As we've got to have the sequence of learning, I can't teach them to say the sound of a letter if they don't recognize what the letter is. So there are obviously prerequisites. And if you're doing treatment, well, the question is always going to come up. You're trying to make the argument. See, if you teach this and then this and then this, maybe if I add D, and maybe this is praise, I'm trying to find out what could I do to get the children in the class to behave, to cooperate, to get more instructional control. So I'm trying to see how much did stickers work, how much did high five work, how much did praise work. Well, they're always going to raise the issue of, well, what if you'd done it in a different order? So I'm just going to be looking and say, maybe the high fives would have worked in the very beginning. Or maybe the high fives didn't work until I first had them going for the tangibles, because they like those sticker charts. They had those in third grade. And then now I'm trying high fives. And then teacher says, I can't run around the room giving high fives all the time. So I'm going to try praise, because praise I can give from anywhere in the room. And I'm trying to find which of these variables is going to be most effective in my classroom. And it's going to make us ask, would the sequence have made a difference? And if they do that, you can change sequences and try with another class or another group and change the sequence. So that's just one of the things that's going to be, we need to be prepared to argue, to be prepared to be open to the questions, it was a sequence, and maybe run another experiment and change the sequence. There also are ways to sort this out with a component analysis. And I'll get, that's not on here, but I can get to that when I do the others. The other issue that comes in is what's called multiple treatment, is that I've got a treatment that I'm doing. I'm trying to get my son to do his homework. And I tell him if he does his homework every day for a week, I'll give him $5. So I've got my treatment plan. And I think I'm having success. I'm starting to get more behavior. And what I didn't know was that my granddad, told my son, I heard your dad trying to get you to do more homework. So let's really encourage, let's be good about this. I'll give you an extra $5. We won't tell dad about it. So now the incentive for the behavior change isn't my contingency. It's going to be, I've got some other multiple treatment going on. Turns out the teacher has a little game in the classroom, tell everybody that gets their homework in the morning gets extra time at recess, because those who don't turn it in have to stay in for recess. So now I've got the teacher with one behavior plan to get homework turned in first thing in the morning. I'm trying something with my son, and my dad is trying something with his grandson. So I'm basing my data based on what I know that I'm manipulating and measuring, but the rest of life has its own other things coming in. So, and since we're talking about applied research, we're not going to be able to control all those variables, even know about them. But if we're going to try to argue that this treatment makes these changes in behavior, I've got to be alert to and susceptible to these other multiple treatments. Even if they're not systematic, there's other things going to be happening. So that, again, that kind of points back to internal, external validity. There are just other issues to raise as we look at graphs and look at journals. You're trying to say, does that make sense? Why else would that have happened? Since behavior has lawfulness to it, we're trying to see, why would those rewards, that reinforcement, make more? Was it contingent? Was it work too hard? Was it asking too much? Was a person capable? And we're just trying to ask more and more questions. We're basically trying to force ourselves to prove that we actually did make the difference. And that brings these two concepts into it. Now, the next design is called alternating treatments. Alternating treatments has the advantage of being able to test more than one thing at a time. With the multiple baseline, we're testing one treatment over a period of time with 2 or 3 different behaviors, or 2 or 3 different children, or 2 or 3 different settings. I'm trying to test this. Will it work at home? Will it work at school? Work in the community? Multiple baseline, I'm just doing one single treatment. It takes a long time. One thing I can do is alternate my treatments rapidly and get information faster. So here I've got, once again, a multi-element design because there's more than one treatment. Just like multiple baseline was more than one baseline, but it's usually the same treatment. Multi-element, now with 2 different treatments, I can have treatment A and treatment B. And what I'm doing here is I'm alternating back and forth. Rather than staying in one condition for a long time, I'm switching back and forth relatively quickly. So I can connect the effects of A and the effects of B. And if I get a big gap between them, I can see that when the teacher in the math class gives stickers for, we'll say, some level of cooperation, I'm getting a high performance. When the teacher in the PE class gives praise, so it's a different class, a different stimulus situation because it's outdoors on PE on the exercise field, and that person is going to get praised for running laps, for example. I'm trying to find out which of these treatments are going to work. I don't want it to be the exact same condition because then it might just be I need a different SD. The coach telling one thing is going to be one set of motivating operations, and the teacher in the class is another. With alternating treatments, I'm getting to some answer faster if I get a nice clean gap like this. If they were overlapping, if I had these, if the results were up and down through both, and I realized that neither one really makes a significant difference consistently, because sometimes this works here, works there. So I'm purposely drawing a nice clean gap to show that when I use treatment A, I'm getting a higher level of performance. I use treatment B, I'm getting a lower level of performance. As far as which one is better, goes back to the very basic question, well, what is the target behavior? What's going to make it so significant? Did you want more behavior? If I wanted more, then whatever I'm doing here would be the one to use. If I wanted less, clearly I don't want to use treatment A. But as an experimental design, it's a way to quickly test a couple. Yes, Bill, please jump in.
So how do we know that it's not just the environment in A and B? How do we know that combining A and B at the same time doesn't reduce satiation? How do we know? I mean, there's so many questions in using such a design.
Exactly. So here, and that's it. We've got two different environments. The idea is we need a different SD. So is that stimulus SD in that environment, is that what's triggering better behavior? When responding to those conditions in this environment, there's not a good SD. So this doesn't answer, so you're asking the right next questions. Well, how can I separate those out? Here I can show this makes more behavior, but that doesn't explain everything. It lets me quickly see that A has some different effect than B. And what I can do is I can go to another design. So this was the alternate treatments. What I can do is go to a component analysis, which is the one I added here, and see if we can't tease out those differences. So now what I've got is, I've got a baseline, and I'm going to go back to the teacher in the classroom trying to get some level of cooperation. And the teacher says, you know, okay, you're the behaviorist. I need to get these kids under control. I need more cooperation. What's the best way to do it? I say, well, a behavioral package. We're going to throw in everything in the kitchen sink. We're going to try every common reinforcer to children of this age group, and we're going to try to reinforce to see, can we just get the level of cooperation up, raising the hand before they call out, or answering, or participating, or following instructions. So I can put in my behavioral package, and I find that when the teacher does the things I told her, which by the way happens to be stickers and high fives and praise. So I'm going to say, for this age group, some like stickers, some like praise, some like high fives. So let's just throw everything in the kitchen sink and see, can we even change this level? And I get this great performance, and all of a sudden, it's working. Something's working, but what's working? And teacher says, well, okay, great. So I know they're capable. I can get the good performance, but I can't run around the room all day giving high fives. I can do some praise. I can get stickers, but I can't run around and put a sticker on every desk and have it happens. I need to sort these components out. I'm going to need to make a little more room here. What I'm going to do with this is I will take the stickers and call that the C condition. I'll take the high fives, call it the B condition, and the praise the E condition. So now I can break them out, and I can put stickers in here, and I can see that I'm getting a certain amount of behavior for stickers. Well, I can't do a legitimate experimental comparison. I need to compare stickers to something else. So if I compare stickers and I go back here to baseline, I realize that, okay, I compare stickers to baseline, but that's still not a legitimate component analysis. I need to bracket my treatment. So I got to put stickers compared to baseline to stickers. And now I can compare, I can't compare the treatment package to this. This just shows me it changed, but I can now show that compared to baseline, stickers do produce some level of responding, not as much as the full package. So I can now go to the next component and take D and take the high fives and try just the high fives, and I get, I'll say, a little higher performance. So I need to compare it, but I can't legitimately compare baseline to stickers to high fives. I need to bracket it to show it. So I'm going to have to compare. I can compare C to D. I can do C again. And now I've got a nice comparison. And I see that C has some effect, D has some effect. And I can tease out that D produces a higher level of responding than C. C produces a higher level than A. But I still don't know I don't know, do I need all three of these to get to here? And so now I need to test the other component. And this is a long, tedious process of testing and isolating each variable, but I'm trying to figure out, teacher says, this is great, I need something that's cost efficient here. So there are the idea of resources. I mean, stickers are not expensive, but whatever it is, some things would be very expensive. So experimentally, I'm trying to answer the question, how would I do this? What design could I use to answer? Go ahead, Bill.
So it sounds like you're doing this with a class for the teacher. And in that case, you're looking at averages. So how do we know that your C condition isn't working with Johnny? And the reason that you're getting more in your D condition is because it works for Susie, Jim, and Fred. And then the next condition. So basically, and it's because Susie's history that she gets stickers at home, so she's used to that. I mean,
oh yeah, that's right. And you're right. If I talk group, but I should just go ahead and turn this back to a single subject, like I was saying. We'll let this just be Johnny for simplicity. And you're right. It's a good point. Yeah, because we get a group together. There's so many variables we can't sort them out. I mean, we could try a group contingency to see if everybody gets it in, if one person gets it in. But for this design point, yeah, we'll stick with single subjects. I'll go back to when the teacher does all of these, she gets the best performance out of Johnny. And so I'm testing, isolating each condition to find out what's going to make the difference. I've got to bracket it. So I've got the C bracketed on the A. I can't compare ACD as not legit. I can compare CDC. So now what I can do is I can take and go ahead and put E in here. I put E in here. Against DCE won't work. I'm going to have to compare it back to C. And there's C. Now it turns out that with E, it turns out I'm getting the best performance. So I see that with E, I get it. With D, I get some. C, I get some. Go ahead.
I'm just going to say that that makes a lot more sense to me now, because if we're working on a critical behavior for somebody, let's say self-injurious, and we want to figure out which component is the important one, yes, that makes a lot more sense.
Yeah, and that's a single subject for what I just keep following to the class. But no, the good catch there and good point to make that we're really, everybody's got his reinforcement history. And experimentally, we're going to see, how do I tease this out? Sometimes it's a combination. I still really haven't compared the high fives. So I could put the E here at the D and then do the E again. And then that would now let me show that sure enough with E, I'm getting a higher level than here. And the point of the component analysis is I should systematically test each one. And the key here is the way they're bracketed. This is a bracket. This is a bracket. This will work. This won't. This will. And that's one way to start to tease out. I've got this behavioral package, and this is a way to experimentally show that it changes when and only when. Sometimes you would get something where, is there room here? You might have a baseline, and then I have a package of X and Y. And I pull at X, I get here. Y, I get here. And then X and Y, I get it back clear. So each contributes some, but together I get all of it. So neither one on its own does it. I need these two components to get the best performance. And depending on how many pieces in your package, you just systematically test. So what I want to do is to set you up for, if you run into this, an exam question, whether it's mine or the board exam, for component analysis, here's how that answer would look. They would say, in experimental design using component analysis, which of the following choices represents a proper component analysis? And what they give you is like for option A, they would give you something like ABC, BCB, ADC, and ADA. And for B, they give you the choice of CBA, CCD, DCD, don't know if I'm almost going so now. Okay. So hopefully you can read it. What I've got on the bottom, I've got all these jumbled letters. What I'm looking for is I've got C on each side of D, so that's properly bracketed. I've got D on each side of E, it's bracketed. I've got C on each side of E, it's bracketed. I've got B on each side of D. So all of your options would have to show that you had proper bracketing to make the argument. I tested the presence of this against this again. So I've got, each is an individual comparison, and the choices on an exam, you're going to see all kinds of letters all jumbled. What you're looking for is that bracketing. And that would represent the answer for component analysis, the way I bracket those out. All right, let's take my shadow out of that. So there were the handful of designs you're going to see in chapter 25. Just some of the basic ideas behind it. You're looking for, in most every case for design, you're looking for the advantage and the disadvantage. And often the disadvantage of one design is fixed by another design. So Bill was pointing out the alternating treatments. Now we don't know which one is contributing how much, so I could then go to a component analysis. I started with an A-B design to show if it even changed. Then I went to the A-B to show the presence or the absence. Then I go to mobile baseline. And with the A-B, I had to pull out the treatment. So that raised ethical issues. You stop treatment that was working. With mobile baseline, I don't have to pull out the treatment, but it takes a lot of time and data. I can just test one thing. So I can do a probe design and save some data, but I can still just test one variable. I go to alternating treatments, I can test two variables, but I have to watch out for some interference or some outside factors. And I don't know how much of either, so that I can go to a component analysis and tease out each piece. So based on your research question, each of those designs will answer different questions, and each one poses its own questions, and each one has its own ethics issues. Design itself is not concerned with ethics. It's like, this is how I see the effects of these, but because we're talking about ABA, human subjects usually, then we've got to be concerned about all the possible ethical issues, like the child that couldn't hear or has auditory processing. That's going to be a confound. I've got to take that consideration. And the board exam will have ethics questions embedded in all the design questions, ethics questions embedded in treatment. So you're going to come to the issues where you realize what's going to favor the client the best, what's going to give them the most possible choices, to be the least intrusive, giving them the biggest payoff for the long term, what's going to give them more skill to be able to do it for themselves, what's going to make them most independent, and be guided by what's best for the client, and then what's the best science behind it. That's going to bring, I want to hit this last point I want to hit before we go is talk about significance. When I was taking psychology courses and statistical courses, that was very taxing for me. I had to get better at math than I'd ever been, and I didn't really completely understand why I would have to sum the squares of two different scores and do this, but I learned if I did the math and I went to my tables and I found my numbers, I could at least look up from the probability tables what numbers were there and then report the statistical significance. I sort of understood I was taking out this theoretical variability, because variability is the huge issue in any kind of research. There's variability. And so there were formulas designed to calculate that. And that's the standard for large groups. With us as a single subject field, we're looking at, since we're talking applied for social significance, we're asking, did it make the client's life better? Did the client benefit? We're looking at the clinical significance. Is, did we solve the problem? We're looking at social validity. Was target behavior agreed to as one that was socially significant was the procedures, the treatment. Is the treatment acceptable? Is that an okay way to treat people? And we're looking at, for the procedures then of the treatment, we had certain outcomes. Are the outcomes acceptable? Because a lot of times we try to change behavior and we're going to get some side effects. I mean, reinforcement is going to work on any behavior, whether we want it to or not. We will start reinforcing certain behaviors and get them stronger. Some other behaviors that were also important may drop out. They're just not on a switcher schedule. So when we get to the issue of significance with an ABA, we're talking single subject, and we're going to want to always respect the client's ethical issues. We can't give the client everything they want all the time because something that's not good for them. We can't let kids run on the street, can't let them eat anything they want. So we can't always do it, but the idea is, do we give them choice? Was it the least intrusive procedure? Did we get any buy-in? If the client sees us solving their problem, they'll probably help, but sometimes our clients aren't able to really communicate that, and they really don't want the change. We know it'll make their life more dependent, but they're not there yet. So we're going to be looking at social significance, clinical significance, social validity. Are the procedures acceptable, the results acceptable, the side effects acceptable? This is Mott Wolf's thing with social validity. And those are considerations for, have we solved the problem? The practical, the pragmatic part. Is it practical? Does it make sense? Would it work? If you've got a procedure that works, but it's just not practical, people just can't do all of those things. It's not cost effective, costs way too much. The cost benefit analysis is going to show it. We just can't afford that much time or that much money. And so this went back to the ethical issues. So those are my main points to share for Chapter 25. Hope that helps a little bit. I am off to the CalLabA conference in Long Beach. I've already got my suitcase packed here on the couch. I've already got my other stuff packed in the car. I got my computer bag ready to go. I've already got my CalLabA application on my phone because everything there. In fact, here's a note that says, see you in the morning, President's Welcome, 8:15 at LBCC. So I'm hitting the road. I'm actually driving up to Tustin, if you know where that is. My uncle, not my great uncle, but it's Uncle Ben. And yes, he did invent the rice. No, Uncle Ben is 86 years old. He's the last of my mom's